Lift up voice, sing it. Oh Lord, you are the air I breathe. Oh Lord, sing it one more time. Lift up your right hand and begin to bless the name of the Lord. Call him the sweetest name that you ever know. Call him the sweetest name that you ever know. It's the greatest thing that has ever happened to me. He picked me from the dungeon. He picked me from the miry clay. Washed me and set my feet upon the rock to stay. He's my great I am, the redeemer of my life. I have no money and no price to pay for the iniquity that I have committed and for the destruction that awaited me. But he delivered my soul on the account of his mercy. Father, we thank you. Bless you for who you are, for your faithfulness and your great grace that is at work upon our life. The Bible said that just for the unjust, that it might bring us unto God. Open your mouth and thank him. And if you don't have something to thank him about, thank him because of my life. Just look at me and say, thank you for the life of God's servant. Thank you for the ministry. Thank you for my family. Thank you for my household. Thank you for the meeting of today. Receive the glory in Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. You will lift up your voice and say, Father, as we gather in this house, let your blessing single me out in the name of Jesus. Open your mouth and ask God to single you out for a miracle, to single you out for divine touch. Say, Lord, single me out for a touch of miracle. Open your mouth, pray. Jesus Christ. In the name of Jesus. There's one prayer we are going to make and it's very important to me. It's in the book of 2 Kings. 2 Kings chapter number 5. If you read from verse 1, the Bible spoke about a man by name Naaman. 2 Kings chapter 5. 2 Kings chapter 5. If you read from verse 1, the Bible spoke about the man Naaman. He said, now Naaman was a mighty man of valor. He was the commander of the arms of Syria. And the Bible said that by him the Lord wrought great deliverance for the people of Syria. He was a man that commanded respect from his king. Have you ever seen where a person walk into palace and king stand up to greet the person? He was such a man. But in the conclusion, the Bible said, but he was a leper. As I look through dictionary to understand the word but, I find out that it is a conjunction. What makes something not to be complete or perfect? But is an adjective. It is something that puts an asterisk over the destiny of a person. Yesterday I raised a prayer. I used the book of 2 Kings also. Chapter number 2 verse 19. Where the men of Jericho cried to Elisha. He said the situation of this city is pleasant. He said, but the waters are not and the ground miscarry. You will lift up your voice and pray today. Every asterisk in my life. He is anointed, but he is intelligent, but he can fast and he can, but she went to school, but she's beautiful, but she worked very hard, but every asterisk in your life, if you shout one amen tonight, it will be terminated. Lord, shout it very loud. Say, Lord. Shout it one more time. Say, Lord. As I pray now, every asterisk in my life, every negative conjunction in my life, in my destiny, in my marriage, in my ministry, your time is up. Disappear, 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 disappear. Whatever that gave ground for mockery,
my life and ministry, in my life and destiny. Your time is up. Your time is up. Open your mouth and pray. Some of you, the hysteric has to do with the sickness in your body. The hysteric in your life, it may have to do with financial problem. Open your mouth and talk to God. Say, Lord, terminate that hysteric. Terminate the hysteric. Terminate the hysteric. Open your mouth. That sickness that make them to conclude your case with a but. That problem that make them conclude your life with a but. In the name of Jesus, and you are terminated by the fire of God. You are terminated. You are terminated from land of grace. You are terminated from my life. You are terminated from my body. You are terminated from my marriage. Open your mouth. Shapalora kapala. Ikazuza ratele kalato. Yamana kalabarata yalata baragata bayalata yalalo. Radadadadadada dololo. Ilekete balata yanamana bala. Ratapashanta lakatova. Erote de la Shapala balabalalo. Impalagada baragada bayalalo. Errata de la lakalalo. Ikalamana palato. Wherever it emanated from, that hysteric, wherever it is coming from, wherever it emanated from, in the name of Jesus, I trace the root, I trace the cause, I trace the foundation, wherever it is coming from, by the fire of God, we lay it to rest. I 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 lay it to rest from this house, from the lives of God's people, from the lives of my family, from the lives of your children. I lay it to rest. Rabakale, Ilolo Tayanama, Yololo Shalalabalabalabalabalabala, Ratele Palakataya, Erosa Balabala, Ikalabalabalada, Shapalagada Bayamanama, Legadegadegadegadelelo, Iletoshana Manama, Rabada Bayabalagada Balata, Ikololo Palatayanadola, in the name of Jesus. Stretch out your hand towards this moment. By the authority in the name of Jesus, whatsoever that poses as a negative conjunction in your life, by the anointing of the Holy Ghost, that hysteric is terminated. Her marriage was a great one, but she was not able to have fruit of the womb. Went to school, did this and did that, but this and this did not work out. They have used an hysteric against me several times in life. When I discovered it, I decided to pray. But he was a leper. The Bible started it. Scripture is very perfect in describing people. Started with the good side. Stretch your hand towards this altar. Started with the good side, but ended with the ugly one. That ugliness in your life, give me a name. It disappear. Barrenness in your life, disappear. In the name of Jesus. When God created you, he made you perfect. Genesis chapter number 1. If you read from verse 4, and the Lord God saw that it was good. When he created man and he gave the woman to man, and he saw that it was good. Another word for good means perfect. Another word for good means okay. From today, your case will be perfected. Is that an name? Do you have to use money to buy a name? I said from today, your case will be perfect. It will be perfected. When it comes to ministry, it will be perfected. When it comes to finance, it will be perfected. Sharp. When it comes to your head, it will be perfected. In the name of Jesus. I pray
pray that this meeting, this 3 days meeting, will yield positive fruit in your life. It will produce fruits in your life. In the name of Jesus. Hallelujah. Please take your seat in the house. Usher, please help me usher those at the back to the front side. Amen, somebody. Hallelujah. You are all blessed and you are welcome to the house of God in the name of Jesus. I said you're welcome to the house of God in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. While Sister Blessing was still leading praises, Pastor Macmuyi and the family, they walk in. Please help me celebrate him. Amen. Amen. I respect things, or 3 things. Number 1, I respect age. That is normal age. If you see me, respect that. Number 2, I respect experience. I have regard for experience. If you have been there for a long time, I know you must have some experience. Are you hearing me? Then number 3, I respect the grace a person carry. Pastor Macmuyi, he carry grace, he carry experience. Please let me celebrate him one more time. MOG, I love you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming. Amen. Pastor Macmuyi is very, very close to me, and anytime we sit down, we don't want to leave each other, because Scripture said, iron sharpens iron. Words that are proceeding from him won't let me let him go. So, thank God. You're welcome, sir. Also help me celebrate Pastor modeling when it comes to the ministry. Most time I visit their church, I see her room. It's like the man of God is even more relaxed than she too. God bless you. Thank you for coming. And the kids are also here. So please also help me celebrate our mama in the house. Mama. Amen. She's our pastor. Also, she pastors me and pastors you and pastors this whole church. Amen. Let me celebrate our mama. Thank you for pastoring us. Hallelujah. The choristers, those of you that are here, God bless you. You will not lose your reward. Instrumentalists, you will not lose your reward. And those of you that are here today, you will not lose your reward. Those that are yet on the way, they will not lose their reward in the name of Jesus. Please, you remember that tomorrow this program is going to continue. Tomorrow the program continues. And please feel free. Pastor Macmuyi will soon be taking charge of the podium. And be expecting something. Be expecting revelation. Be expecting impartation. I've never visited this ministry where I don't see the anointing pouring down. Last Sunday, I was almost crying. I didn't know what was doing me. The thing was just doing me. The anointing came, I just did do me somehow. Just did do. You know? Amen, somebody. You'll be having this ministration very soon. Please, remember tomorrow, the program continues. And I told you, when coming, try to invite people. Very important. Amen, somebody. Bless you. Let's receive the choristers.
Praise God. We, the light of the world, have a number to bless your soul. Listen and remain blessed. You are amazing. You smile from heaven. We call it rainbow. You are amazing. And you look from heaven. We call it sunshine. That's amazing. And you made me, Jesus. amazing. You are amazing, God. You are amazing. You are amazing, God. You amaze me. You are amazing, God. You are amazing. You are amazing, God. You amaze me. Your eyes are full of love, Jesus, and it's overwhelming. Pouring down our sin, and your evidence present all over, blowing as the wind. Your eyes are full of love, Jesus, and it's overwhelming, pouring down our spirit. And your evidence present all over, blowing as the wind. Oh, amazing, God. My Father in heaven. Amazing. Yes, you are. Amazing, God. You blow my and it's overwhelming, pouring down our spirit. And your evidence present all over, blowing us the wind. Yours are and your evidence present all over, blowing up. Amazing God, in heaven. Amazing God.
Hallelujah. God is indeed amazing. Hallelujah. And if you understand that song, you can't just sit around there looking booms as if something has gone wrong with you. Father, we thank you. Help me celebrate the choristers. All right. Please stand up to your feet with a very clapping ovation. Help me make welcome God's servant, a legend when it comes to ministry, a therapist when it comes to music, Pastor Macmuyi. You're welcome, sir.
Amen. If you brought your hands to church, clap for Jesus. Scripture says, clap your hands, all you people, and shout to the Lord with a voice of triumph. If you brought your hands to church and you're here with your voices, give him a shout of victory. Hallelujah. It was a shout that brought down the walls of Jericho. The next shout, everything standing against you as a wall will come down. Are you ready to shout? At the count of 3, roar like a lion. 1, 2, 3, roar! Amen. Amen. Put your right hand up and say, Father, thank you. It's an opportunity to worship you. It's an opportunity to be blessed by your word. Go ahead and just worship him. Wave your hands from side to side. Hallelujah. In Jesus' name. In Jesus' name. I'd like you to walk up to 7 people and tell them tonight is your night. Amen. Amen. hands up. So don't look at me. Say it. Close your eyes. Give him your hands. Just the modeling backing me up will be fine. Okay? So let's go. Yamoba, oh Baba, oh Tempo, oh Sali. The song says, Lord, help me. If I stray away, bring me back. Christians, 80% of Christians in the world stray away every day. And that song is needed. That prayer is needed. So that he can teach us the way to go. Put your right hand up, say, my Father, may your will and your will alone be done in my life. Open your mouth and pray that prayer. And die prayer is difficult to pray. Your will in my life, may it be done. May it be done. In my family, in my church, in Land Grace Ministry, in the city of the name, in Nigeria, in the world, let your will be done. Let your will be done. In the name of Jesus. Let your amen thunder 3 times.
Amen.
2.
Amen.
3.
Amen.
Listen. Glorious deliverer, mighty God, ancient of days, strong and mighty conqueror, bright and morning stars, beautiful, you are worthy Say you are God, far more beautiful than they say you are. Glorious deliverer, mighty God, ancient of days, strong and mighty conqueror, bright and morning stars, beautiful beyond compare, perfect Lord in all your ways. You are worthy of our praise. I have confidence in you, Jesus. I have confidence in you, Savior. I have confidence in you. Anytime, any day, I have confidence in you, Jehovah. You will not lie to me. You will not fail me. No, you will never disappoint me. You will never disappoint me. You will never disappoint. Put your right hand in the chest and sing it. You will never disappoint me. 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 You will never. Oh, your mama. Oh, your mama. Oh, your mama. Oh, your mama. Jesus, Jesus, I have confidence in you. Itiewa guru nala uweyeme o, eni masati uweyeme o, esenu me baba eyasemo Jesu loju uwese o baba uwese. Thank you. When I sing with revelation and understanding. Apostle knows I'm very close to my father. Some years ago, my father is a pastor, so he was driving to church to preach on a Sunday morning. Most of you heard the story. He hit a woman along Macmuyi, close to General Hospital. In less than 2 hours, the woman died. They know I don't take calls on Sunday, but they called me. What is happening? Your father has killed someone, and they want to kill your father and burn his house. I ran to the place, kept my father somewhere, and still went to church to preach. Seek ye first the kingdom of God. You will advise me, rescue your father comes first. Did I not preach? I preached. I locked my father in my room and I went to preach. When I was through, I came back. I took him to the police station. We arrested him by ourselves. He was held up in the police station, a retired soldier man, for 18 days. The people that owned the dead didn't want my father to come out. But they also confessed that it was witchcraft manipulation. And some weeks to the day it happened, I already told my dad that they shouldn't drive the car. That a witch wants to drive the car and kill someone. But he just said, look at church. Church is 2 minutes from his house. So let me just drive to church, not to town. And it happened. He said when he was driving, he didn't know when something took the thing from him. He thought he was using the brake and it was the turtle. Boom! I cried. It was like today will never come. Can I shock you? My dad is alive. After that incident, God helped him. After a while, he got a visa, went to the UK, enjoyed himself, and came back. So when I sing, I'm coming from a place. When I got married, my wife wasn't pregnant. First month, second month, third month. A friend called me and said, Macmuyi, how are you? I said, I'm fine. How's your wife? I said, she's fine. Is she pregnant? I said, that far, you are calculating it. I got home and I asked my wife, are we seeing our pastor, Bishop Chibundu, or we are seeing a medical doctor? And she asked me a question that changed my life forever. It's good to marry a good wife. Young people, may you not fall into the hands of Jezebel. She said, where is your faith? Ah! I said, I will grow it. At night, I would wake up and worship God and speak in tongues. Faith rose up. I was studying God's word like mad. We called on God. God gave us our first baby. She's here. You missed a good place to clap. When people called us barren, God gave us a child. So when I say, has God done anything for you? You will sing it. All of a sudden, my eyes were paining me. I bought the first glass, bought the second glass, bought the third. Saw an optician, saw good doctors. And they said my eyes were reflecting to light. I couldn't drive at night with many glasses. Said, what is this? The light in my church, I reduced them to small bulb. That's my pianist, they can tell. I cried on God and he took away the affliction. Today, I drive at night. I'm looking at light. So when I sing, I don't know what he has done for you. Did you call him and he answered? You will sing it.
Baba
making of a better man, isn't it?
Yes.
Talk to me.
Yes,
is it the
sir.
making of a better man? Is it the making of a better woman?
Yes, sir.
Please hear what God has to say through my mouth. Your life will never remain the same again.
Amen.
There is something that is permitted to be constant in your life. It is changing from glory to glory, from grace to grace, from fire to fire. Can I shock you? There are different types of fire. Different types. There is a fire that gets ignited with a lighter. Have you seen that type before? You blow it like this, it goes, isn't it?
Yes.
There is another one called candle. You can hold down one, you hold and it will go down. There's another one called stove, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, sir.
Stove, you turn it on. 30 minutes, beans never done. You can turn on your stove and run to the market and buy the tomatoes that you are going to use for the. It is fire, isn't it?
Yes.
There is another one called gas cooker. Gas cooker. If you on now, the food done, you mistake say you want to use hand, drop the pot. Do you know? Has it happened to you before? God is taking you from candle light, from stove light, to a light that is brighter, a fire that is sharper than that of gas.
Amen.
There's a fire you will carry. People will see you and get born again. There's a fire you will carry. Sickness cannot stay in your body.
Oh, yes.
There's a fire you will carry. Money will look for you. I was sleeping in my house. Someone called me at midnight. I picked midnight calls. Because someone may be distressed and they need the pastor's help. So they called me and they said, "Sir, send me your account number." I said, "Why?" He said, "Another person woke him up that night and said he had a dream that the Holy Spirit said they should send me this money. Now. And I sent my account. What caused that? Fire. Another word for fire is power. I can keep explaining it. It's glory. It's excellence, ecstasy. It is called grace. And God took you from the north, from the south, from the east, from the west, and dropped you in a land, in a place called land of grace. If your amen is loud, this grace will be evident in your life.
Amen.
I will talk to you briefly, then we will go. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. Colossians chapter 3, verse 16. As you do that, I'd like to appreciate God for this opportunity to stand on this highly anointed and exalted altar. I also want to thank my brother and my friend, the covenant brother, someone that loves God very deeply. I want to thank him and his wife, Apostle Wilson and the dear wife. They're wonderful people. Can you shout, "We love you, sir"? Daddy, we love you. We love you greatly. I scarcely have friends. Scarcely. I mean, scarcely. Scarcely is difficult, very difficult, because of the way ministry is in our time, in our days. But God, in his infinite mercy, brought Apostle Wilson and I together. Lord, may your name be praised forever. Hallelujah. Are you there? If you are there, I want us to read it together. It may be the only scripture we will read for the day. And then we are going to just migrate from there. With your Bible, stand up for the reading of God's word. You see, this is holy scriptures that can never be broken. It is not what we joke with or what we toy with. Are you ready now? Verse 16 with a loud voice. 1 to go. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. Someone say richly. In all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another in what? What do you have in your Bible? In psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing with grace in your hearts to the Lord. Now bless the reading of your word. May it turn lives around. May it quicken our spirits. May the spirit and the power behind the word be at work in our lives in the name of Jesus. Look at 3 persons and tell them, brother, say sister, plus prophecy, plus miracle. Also, let the word of God dwell in you, not poorly, but richly. Move to another person. Say, sister, if you are watching online around the world, look at your neighbor. Call the neighbor, say, come, I want to talk to you. Say, neighbor, how much of God's word do you have inside? Are you poor or rich? Say, neighbor. Neighbor. Let the word of God dwell in you, stay in you, abide in you, rest in you, richly, abundantly. Say loud amen and sit down. Hallelujah. Some people have God's word, only one. John 3:16. For God so loved the world. That's the only one they have. For some, because of fear, learned Psalm 91 verse 1. He that dwells in the secret place of the Most High. That's what some do. Some only John 11:35. And Jesus wept. They are poor. When the devil comes, he's not looking for your height. He's not looking for your color. He's not looking for your race. He doesn't have regard for Chinese people. Doesn't have regard for black people. Doesn't have regard for white people. Doesn't have regard for culture. What he understands is the word of God. And there are times you will place a call through to your pastor and pastor's phone is off. You need the word of God. Are you not going to get to a point where you no longer rely on your pastor, that your pastor is now even relying on you to dispense the word of God? Pastor worked in a church, or he served in a church where his general overseer could send people to him, minister to them. What about you? Daddy, daddy, daddy. Daddy, daddy, daddy. Mommy, mommy, we want to call you. I have a great mentor, Reverend Victor Tenaga. We traveled one time to Port Harcourt to minister. I love him so much, so dearly. And then the wife called him. and said, honey, the kids are sick. I just wanted you to know. Don't bother. I'm handling it. Hoppa. In the next 10 minutes, we called. They are fine. I've prayed for them and they are strong. Give them food. Ilya, that's the. How are you? Say, I'm fine now. I'm fine. Rowe, how are you? I'm fine. Mommy prayed for me and now I am fine. That is a wife. May you not be a knife. Apostle Paul was very angry. When you ought to be teachers, you are still looking for milk. When you ought to be eating meat and cracking bones. From today, regard for the word of God will increase in your life. So Wilson is one. I'm not exaggerating. I don't know how to blow people's trumpets, but I am very factual. If my wife is beautiful, like she's very beautiful, I say she's beautiful. I sabi talk true. You saw my wife, she no fine. Talk to me. If you feel say my wife will make her see you. So we have all agreed that she's beautiful, isn't it? Saying is one of the most gifted and graced men of God in our time. If you don't grow along with him, a time will come you can't access him. He will be too busy. Oh. And I asked him the secret. Allow me share some. He said, I will sit down. Give me your Bible. I will read it 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours. He said, my head will be hot. The grace that you're enjoying. You have seen what ignited it? Talk to me. So God speaks very loudly to his ears next year. Son, arise. I'm taking you to the ends of the earth. There's a place called New York City. Start Land of Grace for me there. And be there. And be there in the next 15 years. Will you close up Takmamba branch? Will you be there for people to run to? Or you will be running after other men of God, thinking that your pastor is a medical doctor. If I'm sick, I go to him. If he doesn't do it well, I go to General Hospital. That's another prophet. The day that did not do well, I enter Central. I'm there. Which one they read? Stella Bassonja. Or Missy. You get daddy oil. You get the other church oil. Hey. I was lying down. The Holy Spirit started to breathe on me. Say, talk like this. I'm not talking what I like to talk. As I talk, the thing they do me. You just have Christians that don't know God. They love his miracles. Christians that don't serve God, they love his testimonies. Christians that don't worship God, they love his power. Give me your power, God, and go. Give me your miracle and go. And Baba is saying, no, let my word dwell in you richly. Let my word. The reason you have a problem, and the reason God lets a problem is because he's drawing you close so that you can read his word. It's true. is true. It is true. If you have a Bible, raise it up. Nice. Lovely people. I celebrate you. The next thing, if you have read your Bible today, let me see it. Not the one we read in church. I have read today. God bless you. Jesus said, I love Jesus. Jesus said, man cannot live by shawarma alone. Man shall not live by apple alone. In case you're an Igbo woman. Some of you are akara bread every morning. Man shall not live by that. He said, but by every word. So you need to look for the word that came out from his mouth. That is what you will live by. Hallelujah. 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 Do you love God's word? Thank you. Do you love God's word? Just put a little bit of tweeters here. I'll be fine. Do you love God's word? Talk to me. Do you love God's word? If it's no, say it. We will pray so that you will love it. Put your right hand up. Say, Father, love for your word. Love for your word. May it rest in me. Say, Father, I receive passion for your word. In Jesus' name. I'm going to give you shortly about 7 things that will emanate from the word. And then we'll close. Are you ready? The mid is too much. So take away, reduce the mid and add the high. Number 1, if you love God and you have an understanding of his word, the first thing you do is to buy a Bible for yourself and read it daily. Read it weekly. Hey, you're looking at pastor. Looking unto Jesus as the author and finisher. So if pastor is not in church, who will you look at? Does his name look like Jesus? Concentration is important. The first thing you do is to buy a Bible. If you have a phone without a Bible, it is a stone. What do you do to stones? You throw them away. So there has to be a Bible in your phone. And you have to have a hard copy. After that, read it daily. Don't miss Sunday services so that you can hear God's word. Not when the man of God or the woman of God is preaching, you are browsing. He's preaching, you are breastfeeding. He's preaching, you are easing yourself. He's preaching, you are sleeping. Something is wrong. After that, after buying a Bible, after hearing your man of God, there's Bible study every Monday. You are never going to miss it. Never. After hearing God's word, the next thing is to meditate on it. This book of the law shall not depart from their mouth. Thou shalt do what? Meditate. How many times? Day and night. That's twice daily. Meditation. You meditate on the word. And then you believe the word. Judge the word. What did I say? The one way daddy talks so incorrect, he said, now so the word be. No, which doctrine be that? Which one? Oh, yeah. I was explaining in my church on Sunday afternoon. And I just said that character is easier to change than war. You know, we grew up and they taught us to marry who has character that is war. rather than to marry who is beautiful without character. So I now ask the question, which one can we change? Character or what? So some people were arguing what I was preaching, and they said money can change what is a lie. When your nose is very big, how much will change it? When your mouth is as wide nose, your name is now Nosa High. Your mouth is big, Matthew. There's what they call hydrocephalus in medicine. A big head, like 3 heads go there on top of you. Which makeup or which cap? $10 billion, can they change that? Well, do you know that if you put your knees on the ground and the person that is wawa is hearing God's word? Sorry, the person that has bad character is hearing God's word, born again. That is talking to the person, anointing the person, feeding the person with God's word, giving him communion all the time. Do you know character can change? Talk to me. My wife told me, I'm not marrying you. You are not a prayer warrior. You don't pray. You know they pray. But today, she's learning from me. Did character no change? When I was younger than this, I was a bad. I worry. It is almost 8 years now I've been married, right? I'm cool. I've changed. I could be very angry and I'll break your head. I was music director, they slap people for choir. You sing off key. But since I've been pastoring a church, I've not slapped someone inside the church during a service. It will be at the corner if I want to discipline someone. Anger died. So don't be judging what pastor is saying or what the word is saying. The word is in you. That greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. And you are saying, is he true? Look at your mouth. 2 Corinthians 5:17, the Bible says, if any man be in Christ, is a new creature. You say it's a lie. I never knew since I've been in Christ. I'm not told. You're judging God's word. No, believe it. First, read it. Second, meditate on it. Third, believe it, meditate on it, read it. Become it. Manifest it, pray it. If the word says pay your tithe, brother, pay your tithe. If you have paid your tithe consistently for the past 6 months, let me see your hand. Jesus is a mighty God. Where is our apostle? You want to do a beggar? Tithe. Completely. January, February, 6 months. You have not, chop the tithe. Let me see you. When the house of God, the power that brought Ananias and Sapphira down. Can I see the hand? You see, less than 80% of the church not tithing regularly. Are you answering or doing the word? Talk to me. You need to do the word. Put your right hand up. See better prayer points. Put your right hand up. Say, Father, grant me the grace to pay my tithe every time. In Jesus' name. Can your amen be loud 3 times? 2, 3. At fire. I don't eat my tithe. Don't eat your own. I'm hearing in my spirit that some people say, no, you get work, the tithe. I don't get work. It's a lie. Do you spend money? That's the question. If you have not spent money in the past 1 month, let me see your hand. So you have, all of us, we are spending money every day, isn't it? Someone gives you 100 naira for a church card. Say, I just make I dash you 100 naira. If you like, use on buy card. It's God's own. 10 card, you keep on. You keep it. Let's move on. Clap your hands for Jesus. The next one. If you study God's word diligently, you will love God and love man. You will love who? And man. So a man that offends you, a church member offends you, you still have to love him. Yes. I don't like the way mama talked to me, you still love her. That day when they preach, he point and give me like this. You don't have a choice, so you are under an obligation to love. The sister sing the song. Not be I tell him for TV, it no concern you. Make it sing and wear the next time. You still need to love her. The way to show to God that you love God is to love man that he created. Don't keep malice with any man. Don't be angry with any man. There's some people that will call you, you won't take. You are angry. You don't love man. In church here, someone won't sit down near me. Just carry back. Just go to the next seat. We have to repent. Did you hear me? We have to repent. Look at your neighbor. One neighbor. Hold the hand of that neighbor. Say, neighbor, I pray for you today. Grace to love God and love man is resting in you. In Jesus' name. Can you amen be very loud? Number 3, you sincerely worship God every day. You sincerely praise God every day. You sincerely thank him every day. There's a need to worship him, to praise him, and thank him daily. The Bible says the Father seeks such that will worship him in spirit and in truth. The Bible says that God, Baba, he dwells, he inhabits in the praises of his people. So David said, I will bless the Lord at all times, and his praises shall continually be where? In my mouth. The mouth is not to curse. It's to worship God. It's to praise God. It's to thank him. Number 4, you need to engage in all kinds of prayer. Someone say all kinds of prayer. I will talk about 2 kinds of prayer because of time. One is intercession. The other is supplication. Say intercession. Say supplication. Intercession is praying for people. Praying for what God wants. Praying for a city. Praying for sick people in the hospital. Praying for pregnant people. Praying for your pastor. Praying for your leaders. Praying for people to receive Jesus. Praying against the work of the devil in your land. That is intercession. Supplication, supply. You are asking God to give you your supply, what you need. Do you understand the difference now? Lord, give me a car. Is that intercession or supplication? Lord, give me a child. Is it intercession or supplication? Let me ask you a question. Which one do we really do? And what God wants is intercession. This in my mind, pumping as I got to pastor's office. I looked at a book written by Papa Kenneth Hagin, and the first thing I saw was intercession. This selfishness of me, myself, and I. You know, they let us collect miracle from God. Open your mouth and pray. Baba, no, it's fine. But a man that is sick in the hospital needs your prayer. There are times, can I shock you? There are times Your pastor will be coming out from a 7-day fast for a member. And another one will come and say, Papa, see the one where they do me. He will add another 7 days himself. For who? So why will he not be blessed? What is he doing? Is it supplication or intercession? You, what do you do? Supplication. Change it. Supplication is not bad. Put intercession first. Seek ye first the kingdom of God. Look at the way Jesus put prayer. Or where? Our Father who art in heaven. What is that? Hallowed be thy name. What is that? Praise, thanksgiving, worship. What's the next line? Thy kingdom come. What is that doing? Is that supplication or intercession? Intercession. Thy will be done. Is that intercession or supplication? What's the next line after thy will be done? Huh? As it is in personal. Which one came first? Intercession or supplication? Which one will you now do first? Clap your hands for Jesus. If you are praying for this sister 3 hours every day, God will raise another person to pray for you. You can come to God with your needs 7 times in a week and he's not listening to you. Who selfish, who like a gwegbe, the visa men, the motor men, the woman. Baba is asking you, have you prayed for people to get born again? Have you prayed for your pastor? Have you prayed for your choir director? Have you prayed for your instrumentalist? Put your right hand up. Say, my Father, I pray for my pastor. I pray for his wife. I pray for his leaders. I pray for the entire church. We will not fail. We will rule and reign. Clap your hands and pray. Come on, shout that prayer. Mention your pastor's name. Mention your pastor's wife's name. Mention the children. Mention the leaders of the church. Pastor Ima. Mention his name. Intercede for them. Intercede for pastors. Intercede for men of God. Intercede for Nigeria. Nigeria is going through a hard time. Raise your voice and begin to pray. Who is it that saith a thing and it comes to pass when the Lord had not commanded it? Father, what you have not said concerning Nigeria will stand. It shall not stand. It shall not stand. Let your amen be loud 3 times. 2, 3. All kinds of prayer. I just gave you 2. Number 5, humility. Honor. Humility. The way to greatness is humility and honor. Honor thy father. There are 4 fathers or 4 parents you need to honor in your life with humility. First, never neglect your biological father. Never neglect your biological mother. And then never neglect your spiritual father. Never neglect your spiritual mother. Bishop Chibudu once taught us that your earthly father talks about where you are coming from, and your spiritual father takes you to the place where you are going. Never neglect it. The times I've found favor in my life, there are times that I celebrated my fathers, my mentors. Don't joke with them. Don't subscribe your phone without thinking if pastor or your dad or your mom has subscribed. You are just subscribing. 4 gig. And they are doing live broadcasts. And you have not given them a recharge card once. Something is wrong somewhere. You are not humble. James 4:6 tells us that he gives grace to who? Chapter 13 verse 52. The worst sin may not be fornication, may not be malice, it may not be lying. It is pride. Fornication didn't cause war in heaven. Adultery, as bad as it is, didn't cause war in heaven. Hey, the Bible says, and there was war. Where? In heaven. Who carry and go? Satan. What did he do? He was. And God says he resists the proud. What does that mean? He fights the proud. I refuse to be proud. I thought you would say that to yourself. Say it, say it, say it, say I refuse to be proud. Say it again, I refuse to be proud. Let me tell you, the great men of God you see, they are humble people. I mean, very humble. Because the way up is humility. Put your right hand up. That seed, say, Father, that seed of humility, may it grow in me. In Jesus' name. Look at me. The seed is there. It's one of the fruits of the Spirit. The Spirit is in you. So the seed is there. He's there. So you need to know that it is there, one, and then you need to activate it. If pastor says today the program is prayer, and you come and say, why don't we do praise? You are not humble. See, you see, it's cooked like once in a month. What, who they cook? Who's supposed to cook what he like? She humbled herself to learn how to eat ogbono. Because a wife has to be humble. Pastor talking you talk your own. You are not humble. Choir leader say, may we march come here. You say, may we march go there. You are not humble. Your leader stands up to say, this is what we do, and you say, no. You know what humility is? Humility is equal to submission. I was coming for this program and I needed to pray. Watch. I needed to pray. The time I scheduled for prayer, my father just born me. He called, we are going for a meeting. I said, student. I said, Daddy, I began to where I want to go preach. He said, get dressed. I'm coming to your house to pick you now. I followed him. When I got to the event, they were doing their own. It got to a point, I told my wife, make una continue. I left. When we got to the car, we were coming. My father was talking to me. He knew I wasn't responding. He told my wife, leave him. He don't enter that side. But I have to be humble first. To what preaching am I coming to preach? When my father called me, I will say, I'm not to go. Humility is important. When you study the word, the more you study, the more humble you become. The more you read, the more humble you become. The more you meditate on the word, the more humble you become. The more you confess the word, the more humble you become. Someone say the word. Say it. Say the word is my guide. Can I add one more so that we'll close? Are you ready for it? If you're ready, say amen. Integrity and faithfulness is in the word. Scriptures tell us that your yea should be yea, and your nay should be nay. That's your yes should be yes, and your no should be no. I am a member of Rescue Zone. Let it be true. I am a member of Land of Grace. Let it be true. Apostle Paul advised, It's an advice. He said you can have many mentors, but one father. And we have church members that have up to 30 daddy. Appa! How can you have oil from Mountain of Fire, oil from Winners, oil from these churches are good, I didn't say they're not good. But who is your father? Who is covering you? On the day of trouble, which person's face go appear? Yeah? And God sees the heart. He knows you will drop 20 naira here and take 2,000 to that. I have some members, they will not give me money in church. When we finally interview them, they spend it somewhere, like Sele. I hate to lie, or this, I can't be lying, prophetic lie, no. If we need chairs in church, I will tell you, we need 50 chairs. Give me 70,000. Well, yeah, to 2,000. I will not be telling you, okay, now, sand, run to your bank account, withdraw that money by fire, and be running here. Just hear the Lord. He told me, I refuse to prophesy. And so when you see genuine prophets and eat the fruit, prophets have reward. Jesus said, Amen. Who signed a prophet? You take the prophet's reward. Prophet's reward. Yes. You take it. On Tuesday, another prayer home. On Wednesday, another place. Then they will trick you. Take all the currencies. Use it to carry sand. 1,000 naira, put sand. 500, put sand. 200, put sand. 100, put sand. 50 naira, put sand. 5 naira might take. God not like 5 naira. Whether they're the only way. Put all of them come. Some they turn it to dollar and pounds. Dollar, put sand. Pound, put sand. Euro, put sand. Take it to the altar and be crying. Lie. It's a lie. How can you be a member of this church and you know where they sell coconut and they are breaking it? It's an error. Coconut. Egg. My son, Pastor David, attended the church before, where they told them that an enemy is pursuing you people. So, wear the back shirt, the back of your shirt, go work on Monday. And he's a banker. So, he wear back of suit. And with egg, looking for a 4 junction to break it. Back of shirt. Do like this, God forbid. Please be humble. It's a prayer to pray. There's a great man of God, I won't mention his name. He came to Benin because he lost his dad many years ago. The dad's parlor was filled. He's very great. He's one of the first 5 in Nigeria. He stood up for people to sit down. He stood up and he became the usher. Sit here. In fact, I'm talking about Pastor Chris. It's great. Is that not humility? Jesus was very humble. He was God, yet he didn't consider himself God. He took the form of a man. Do you know what it means For the ancient of days, the lily of the valleys, the bright and morning star, the first and last, the Alpha and the Omega, the one who was and is to come, the maker, the creator of the heavens and earth. Do you know what it means for him to squeeze himself so that he can live inside you? So you now have the mouth to say, Christ in me, the hope of glory. That's humility. Say, I am humble. Hasha, matter. The last one, kingdom advancement. This one, I saw it written for me by the Spirit. Kingdom advancement. Someone say kingdom advancement. You know what that means? That is Matthew 6:33. Seek ye the kingdom of God. Let's how you spend your money, what you spend your money on, calculate it. It will tell you if you are advancing kingdom or not. How many chairs have you bought for Jesus? How many souls have you won for Jesus? All the prayer we pray all the time is, Lord, give me, I need, give me, help me, give me, help me, give me. What can I use me? I will build a church for you. Someone emptied his salary and bought a pulpit. He was very broke. In my church, kingdom advancement. Daddy, let's have a crusade. I will put 50,000 naira into it. Daddy, let's win souls for the Lord. Daddy, when we close, people run to meet Daddy. Is problem. It's not Daddy. Which day be evangelism? I want to come. Daddy, can I join the choir? Daddy, I feel work as usher. Daddy, I think they buy the polish of your shoe every month. Or Daddy, I think they